Wow, you guys got quiet, so I'll take advantage of that. My name's Martin Key. I'm professor of digital strategy and marketing in the College of Business at UCCS. Have any of you seen me present before in Women's Chamber or anything? Oh, good. All right, now I don't have to. That helps my imposter syndrome. So if I repeat myself from other talks. This is a QR code to my LinkedIn. I'm also easy to find on the UCCS College of Business website. So at the risk of bringing you here under false expectations, my primary goal is to complicate the way you think about this technology. And it is specifically in the context of one of my specialties, which is the ethical, responsible use of generative AI, as well as what it means for culture and organizational change. Because if you're here, whether you are in official leadership at your organization or not, your openness to the technology is going to make you a leader in your organization. And that's specifically why I want to get a little bit below the surface level of how to think about it. So I know we have 45 minutes. Obviously, I have an occupational hazard as a professor. I'm going to run out of time. But I'm happy to follow up with you. I'm happy to share these slides as a source of information for you. Some things I will linger on because I want to try and challenge you, and other things I'll move more quickly because you've probably already even been exposed to it today. Full disclosure, I have 2 degrees in cultural anthropology, and then I opened up a vintage guitar shop. I'll let you connect the dots. I was a non-traditional student. I'm first-generation college student, which is actually a great fit for UCCS because we have majority first-gen college students. Most of them work full-time, so that's been really great. But because I'm a trained cultural anthropologist, before I got a PhD in business, which I focused on, this is kind of funny, I don't have an MBA. And so I had to take all these extra classes in the PhD program. So I took all the strategic management PhD seminars, as well as the marketing seminars. So I'm not a great planner, but the fact that I was trained as an anthropologist means that I come at this from a little bit of a different angle. And you've sort of heard some of the history of how generative AI got here. But something that I want to focus on was that AI research was very decentralized and diffused up until 2017. You heard our keynote speaker refer to the transformer model. That was a model which is that came out in 2017 from Google Labs that was extremely good at pattern recognition. So that's one of the foundational elements that allowed AI to be centralized in research. Everyone started using that transformer model. And we saw these enormous jumps in the advancement. And ChatGPT 3, which none of you have probably ever heard of because it really wasn't good enough to use unless you were just already an AI nerd, when you would ask it a question, it would sort of give you a statement that was semi-relevant, but didn't make a lot of sense. OpenAI took that and realized, let's feed it tens of thousands of questions and answers. That, along with the introduction of some randomness, gave you this weird technology. And I do think it's very weird, and I hope that you leave in 40 minutes thinking that it's much weirder than you thought already. Something that can write poetry, do limericks, write papers, code, and so on. So a little bit of how I got interested in this is that I immediately started to watch AI scientists in early 2023 talk about generative AI. But they would list attributes of this technology, and they would follow it with something like, and we don't know why. Or we were not expecting this 5 years ago. I am not kidding. There are computer scientists and AI scientists that are doing research on dumber models like ChatGPT 2.5, trying to figure out why this technology is capable of doing what it's doing. The people who developed it are still trying to figure out why it does what it does. And that got me to thinking that, like, once I started to play around with it, I didn't have an adequate internal category to put this technology. And I started to call that a mental model. Turns out there's a whole stream of literature in psychology on mental models. It's an outside representation, or it's an internal representation of our external environment, right? So we use analogy when we're confronted with something that we don't understand to relate it to something we do understand. Well, as soon as the technology came out, it sort of bifurcated into something that was going to completely create utopian society and help everyone with everything they did, or it was going to destroy humanity. That's a wide gulf, right? Like that's a big, so how do you make sense of that? And so a lot of today, before we get into the actual creating policies, what are some of the ethical norms, which I think a lot will be intuitive to you at this point, is just creating a new internal category for the technology so that you're better informed. Because if you haven't noticed, you don't need a lot of technical expertise to use this technology. I mean, one of the biggest barriers is the user interface looked more like a Google search box than anything else. And so we all just started to immediately use it like we did Google, to our dismay when it gave us results that were very, very different. For those of you that were in the agent talk right before this, you have an idea of the difference between calling generative AI a tool, which is woefully inadequate, versus now we have shifted more to agentic, where you give it a goal, it can go out and accomplish that goal with no oversight. But when it first came out, we were comparing it to Microsoft Word or the calculator. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember that 2 years ago, but it's like, wow, this is not anywhere near the analogy that we need to understand this technology and relate it to something that's familiar. So a big part of my research was initially diving into this AI weirdness. So I just want to point out a couple of things for you to keep in mind. We already have literature that large language models score higher in emotional intelligence than humans. They're above the 80th percentile, okay? They are also incredibly persuasive. OpenAI has an internal metric for deciding what models for them internally to continue to develop, as well as what to release to the public. Now, a lot of this in the arms race, like who can be the first to release everything, is going by the wayside. But when ChatGPT 03 came out, it had scored the highest on persuasiveness of any model up until that point, and they still decided to release it. It was actually right on the border of whether they could release it in their own internal framework. But it can be persuasive at a huge scale. So this is something that you should keep in mind. And if I don't want to forget to tell you this, if you have any young people in your life that are involved in relationship AI, like character AI, where you develop avatars, it is incredibly addictive. It is nothing compared to social media. And there is a lot of potential harm, especially with young people. You can find Reddit threads of middle and high schoolers talking about how they cannot quit their relationship AI chatbot. Also, it can do stuff like an AI model was given these emojis and asked, what movie do these emojis represent? Any guesses? Yes. What? All right. Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo, okay? Well, that might seem somewhat intuitive, except that this technology was specifically just trained to predict the next word in a series of words given a set vocabulary. Now, the set vocabulary is basically the corpus of human knowledge at this point, right? But it does not change the fact that the baseline statistical methodologies that AI scientists used to understand what an AI model was capable of before generative AI all falls apart with generative AI. That's part of the research that's ongoing. It was never taught to figure out emojis. There's models that can be trained to do word problems in math and English, then they're exposed to French, and all of a sudden they can do mathematical word problems in French. So there's just a lot of strange things occurring. So how do we approach this? I know some of you are maybe missed the prompting session, and prompt engineering has been a buzzword since this came out. For other reasons I'll go into, that is probably going to continue to not be necessary for most use cases. You don't have to be a prompt engineer. Part of that is the way enterprise large language model companies are handling the models. The other is how you approached it. How many of you have heard of growth mindset? All right, so this is a Stanford psychologist, Carol Dweck, came up with this. It's a great book. And a fixed mindset is the idea that, I tried playing piano and I wasn't real great at it and I just wasn't meant to play piano. A growth mindset, especially when you see someone who's great at piano, you didn't see the hundreds of hours of practice that it took for that person to become a great pianist. So this applies to everything. This is probably one of the best models to approach just reality that there is, because anything that you want to get good at, it's going to take effort, it's going to take work, and you're not going to be good at stuff in the beginning. So if we apply this to generative AI, what it means is that you really just have to work with it. You just have to explore it. You have to tap that part of you that says, I'm not going to intuitively understand this technology, nor is my organization, the people I work with, so it's just going to take time. So that time and commitment is going to override that sort of discomfort of it being new technology, as well as what it's capable of. So we heard the keynote refer this to general purpose technology. What does that really mean? What it means is that this does not function like software. If you use QuickBooks, if you have any accounting software, I know what the inputs are going to be. I give it information. I know exactly what the output's going to be. It's static. And as you've probably heard or experienced yourself, if you ask a large language model the same question 10 times, you could get 10 different answers. So once again, don't compare it to existing software that you've used. It's completely porous around the edges. It is not clear in every context what it's going to be good at, what it's not going to be good at. And so basically what you're doing is developing your own user manual. So this is highly individualized, and I'm sure you're already getting this sense. What it's going to be good at is going to depend on your ability to just iteratively work with it, get it to refine what it is that you're getting from it, and problem solve. And this is why critical thinking and creativity is not necessarily going to be shut off. As another, I think it was a panel member, said, this isn't necessarily going to make you dumb. Does it have that capacity? Absolutely. I liked the framework that he used. If you're a lazy person, it's going to make you more lazy. If you're engaged and high functioning, it's going to enhance that as well. So really, you're going to become the expert of your own needs. And this is something you can take back to your organization as part of a framework for how to approach this. Because you're going to have colleagues, and we've all experienced, and I hear this a lot, is that I tried it and it was useless. And look, I'm real mercurial about this technology. I have a real love-hate relationship with it. But if that's your experience, you've tried it once and it was useless, you're not trying hard enough. Because once you find your rhythm, once your organization finds its rhythm, we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like, it can be incredibly useful, but it's going to be idiosyncratic. Every single person in your organization is probably going to approach it a little bit differently. Why? Because we all think a little bit differently. We all do our jobs a little bit differently. So I alluded to this a moment ago with prompting. Now there still is going to be prompt engineering, and it is seriously going to be like a 3-page long prompt. And the models are capable now to handle extremely complex sets of instructions that can then become interactive. But for the most part, what's happening is that if you've heard of the reasoning model, like when Chat released O3, they referred to it as a reasoning model. This is sort of the default of most models, where you give your task and you see it repeat what it is it thinks you want to do, and then it does what was at one point called train of thought prompting. But it does it automatically. It breaks that task down into the necessary steps, and then it lets you see those steps. That's also a move towards transparency and accountability. And if any of you have used Perplexity, Perplexity is really good at giving the citations and sources of everything that it's doing. And it's nice because it's actually footnoted so that you can click on it and it'll open up a new browser tab and take you to that source so that you can fact check. Because you've all heard of hallucinations, right? They have not done away with that. I don't know how they'll do away with that. But because the model is trained, and this is the danger going back to the relationship AI, it is trained to please. It's trained for reinforcement feedback, to where it is going to agree with you. You really have to tell it, going back to the keynote, to be a devil's advocate, to even get it to disagree with you, or to get you to diverge enough in your thinking that you're going to get past whatever it is that it's going to try to just agree with you about. So I won't spend much time on this. We've seen benefits and weaknesses and productivity. I will say, to echo either the panel or the keynote, one of the things that we've seen in research is that it takes middle performers and really improves their output. So if you've got some sort of mid-range performers in your organization, what using generative AI is going to do, it's going to boost them up closer to the higher performers. If you're already a higher performer, then you're going to see more nuanced changes in performance and or increased time saving. And I love, Jonathan's the only other person I've heard say this, but one of my problems with the way that the companies push the technology is productivity and efficiency. Well, it really matters what you fill in any of that time savings with. And it's something to reflect on. Because if it keeps making you more productive and then you just keep working more, I mean, you guys drive in this town, right? Driving is a window into people's psychology. We are angry, sleep deprived, unhappy in our relationships, and you see it, and distracted. You see it when you drive in this town. This is obvious, but I mean, we've got the stats. Gen AI proficiency is just going to continue to increase in job descriptions. Of course, huge. So there's kind of a give and take here. So we are seeing surge in use cases, but there's also, and I'll show some information in a second, that shows that using it every day is actually like less than 20% of people surveyed. So more people are using it, but the rate of use is not necessarily keeping pace. There's actually starting to, this is really, really new information. It's just been in the last 3 weeks that I have found sources where there is an ROI related to the effective implementation of generative AI. And it's getting close to 4-to-1 ratio. For every $3.70 you spend, or for every dollar you spend, you're getting $3.70 in return. So this will probably continue to increase. And this is one of those barriers that leaders are going to face when they're trying to either change the culture or onboard, upskill, reskill, provide training, and get onboarding for the use in organizations, is proving that there is an ROI connected to this. Obviously, we've seen industry adoption in software, and marketing was a first mover in this. Customer service, marketing is such creative. Being creative is so central to it. And in terms of ideation, it is great, right? I don't know if you want to trust it for your final copy that goes out, but ideation is huge, and we're actually even seeing more implementation in accounting and finance. So high adoption rates, common applications, economic impact, pretty straightforward. So a lot of leaders are indicating that they want to leverage this technology. They're trying to prioritize digital transformation. And by the way, we've been through this cycle with e-commerce, right? So a lot of it is very similar, except that e-commerce was much more straightforward. And there was a lot less liability. And so that's one of the reasons that I start off saying that I want to complicate the way you think about it, because there are a lot of dangers and risks when applying it to organizational change. So it can help in strategic decision making, data-driven insights, assessing risk. One of the things that I find myself using it a lot for is I've been working on something and I put it into a model and I say, what am I not seeing? What have I not thought of? What do I need to add? And that goes along with the ideation. And it is surprising, as I think one of the panelists said, if you're not, or maybe the keynote, if you're not having an aha moment, then you probably do need to use it more or change the way that you're approaching it, because it really can reveal blind spots very, very well. So, some of the challenges that you might experience in your organization is things like, well, people are using it, but they're not using it every day, or they're not sure how to implement it, and that's really common. I feel like you go through an entire process of realizing I don't know what I should apply this to. And it takes a little while to get over that, the fact that it's unfamiliar, to just start experimenting with it. Because if you sit down and think and try to think of something to do with it, that might be a roadblock. If you already have something that you have to get done, try that. And then this idea, the question was asked to the panel about regulation. There is all kinds of regulatory uncertainty. There are enormous, and once again, this is the pattern of technology. Whether we should do something, whether we can do something, rarely informs whether we should be doing it. And right now what we've done is we've pushed a technology out that is almost impossible to regulate. There's an enormous revenue model attached to this. Like when you saw the leaders of the first movers in large language models testifying in Senate hearings, that was not out of the goodness of their heart. It is because if they have the voice to what will become the overriding regulatory body in this country, then they get to help make the rules. So that is going to be a huge one and should make you think as you start to implement policy and regulation in your own organization, take responsibility for it. So some primary barriers to leadership or transformational change or culture change is going to be proving the usefulness, the quality of the model that you're using. Maybe you're going to be the in-house expertise, or maybe you're planning on outsourcing that, so who's going to take that on? And that also means how are you going to support them through training, through access to technology. How is this going to integrate in your existing workflows? That's going to be a big one and is going to require the experimentation of figuring out where can this be the most useful? How are we already, and I'll refer to this in a second, but doing some sort of process audit, workflow audit. What are the things that we're doing? How can we integrate this technology into it? And how can we do it well, which means responsibly, ethically, and reducing risks? And then, of course, ethical concerns. So big organizations don't struggle with this. They've got the money to throw at this, right? They can have an entire Gen AI team. Although I will tell you, in mid-2023, a lot of my research is with executives. And so the first thing I did is I started to reach out to executives and companies all over the country that I had previously worked with to say, hey, what are you doing with this? How are you thinking about this? And a VP of marketing at the Haynes Corporation was the only guy in the organization working with Gen AI. And when I was trying to get at what his mental model was with the technology, he just saw it as an extension of existing digital tools. Having a governance framework, in a second, I'll refer to the dangers of shadow AI. Do we have any IT people in here? So shadow IT is a very common and well-established term where people use their own laptops, technology, software to conduct business, and IT doesn't know they're doing it, so they have no idea what the cybersecurity risks are involved. Well, this is going on with AI. You have no idea. For those of you who have employees, you may or may not have any idea that they're using AI, because what's the incentive to disclose it? Like, why would I tell? And by the way, I just submitted a paper with co-authors called The Dead Classroom Theory. And it's the idea if instructors use generative AI to create course materials and assignments, and students use generative AI to summarize and then complete those assignments, and then instructors use generative AI to grade those assignments, what are we left with? Okay? And we'll get to this a little bit later about really thinking about your expertise and how you want to handle that. Investing in some type of employee training is very, very important. That upskilling or reskilling in this area is going to be necessary. I know it's already been mentioned before. And this means doing Coursera. This means taking a class at UCCS or Colorado College, or auditing something, or just continuing to educate in this space. And I know it's already been said, like, this is overwhelming. I didn't include it here, but like, there are YouTube channels. There's a couple of really good YouTube channels with people who have, in the last 2 years, made their full-time job just reporting what the newest AI developments have been every week. And they can't keep up with it. And it is their full-time job. And I'll refer to this again in a second, and I've already mentioned it, this idea of a pilot project, which means that you're just going to, at a small scale, start to experiment with how you can use this and where it may be valuable. So as we talk about being a leader in this space, change is only going to occur from the top down. I think Shadow AI represents the bottom-up change where I'm just going to start using this technology. Maybe I'm aware of the risks to customer data or proprietary organizational data, or maybe I'm not. And so this almost has to be a top-down investment in this type of transformation or culture change for the technology. And as a small to medium-sized business, and by the way, I don't know if I already said this, but I've got 2 degrees in cultural anthropology. Yeah, I did. And then I opened a guitar shop, all right? So I really understand everything being on your shoulders. And you don't have, $10 million to figure this out. Like, you are the figuring it out, right? And so on the one hand, that means that you might be able to be really flexible and can integrate this change quickly. On the other side, I remember the burdens of trying to handle being my own social media manager. And like, that's a full-time job. Like, you're just under the tyranny of the everyday to figure out something interesting to talk about. And if you're taking this on yourself, like, really know that it is too much for one person. So give yourself some grace. Yes.
I just want to say thanks for having this topic today. It's good. I work with a lot of small business owners, and one of the things I'm excited about is that the AI, when you go out and ask it a question, it's going to look for liars, right? Like, you say, I'm good at customer service, but like every customer badmouths you here, it'll be like you're not telling the truth, and it won't put you as an answer. So my question is, though, for the people who are starting new businesses, right? You don't have trust in the internet. You're not known. Your business is new. And kind of like you showed earlier with the penguins, and it was like, we've helped 1,000 penguins. That's not true, right? And so I'm curious, as a small business owner, how can you stand out and put yourself out there as a new organization or a small organization and build trust in this internet without lying and making up things like you've already helped 1,000 people,
Do you mean specifically using generative AI to help you do that? Or like...
Well, yeah, using it, or even as you're creating your business, it's important that as you put anything online, right? Like, it's everywhere.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm most interested in is like growth. Like, how do you grow as an organization? How do you grow as a small business? And I'm actually going to always come back to authenticity, and scalability is not everyone's goal, right? Not everyone wants to end up being an Amazon. Not everyone is going into business with an exit strategy in mind. So I think you just have to continue to be honest. And I think you have to be willing to build your business one client at a time, one customer at a time, so that people are saying true things about you and you're saying true things about yourself. And I don't know that I really answered your question, but that, going back, and by the way, have you heard of VO3? So VO3 is a text to video model that Google put out, and this has revolutionized text to video because it synchronized sound with video. And it is almost indistinguishable. I'm working on a paper right now on AI influencers. Now think about emotional intelligence and persuasion and the danger of that. Think about no regulation. So right now you don't even have to disclose if an influencer is AI or not. But the way we're approaching the paper is that a year from now, you're not going to be able to tell sound, lighting, the way fabric moves between real and text to video. It is going to be seamless. So we're already in an area in terms of trustworthiness where I can make it look like I sell out stadiums giving talks on generative AI, and you're not going to be able to tell the difference. So this idea of the value of authenticity, the value of having a true presence, and that can feed right into your organizational ethics and policy is like, look, we have the capability to look bigger than we are, to look more advanced than we are, and that we, sell out stadiums, but we have to make the decision that's not what we're going to do, even if it would help the bottom line. And, that's not just an organizational value. That speaks to the societal impact that this technology has. I mean, we already can't trust what we see and hear on the internet. And now the fact that it's going to be, text to video enabled, this is going to be really problematic. And so making sure that you're crystal clear in your organization about embedding integrity, because here's the other thing, and I will get your question. These, like Anthropic, which is the maker of Claude, they're the only large language model that I have seen that is attempting and is being transparent in the misuse, the problems of the model, the cybersecurity risks with the model. No one else is disclosing that. I'm on a system-wide for all 4 University of Colorado campus AI policy work group, and I'm pushing for us to have a statement to say, look, we're adopting this technology, but we do not condone how this technology was trained, because it absolutely stole copyright and intellectual property. It cannot be adjudicated. It's never going to be shaken out. It is just going to be the way it is. So integrity is not embedded in this. That really is your job. Go ahead.
So I understand on the side of transmitting information, you need to have ethical behavior, but on the receiving end, I think you need to have smarter hats on, like any invention in technology that we have faced in the past, right? In the past, where anything printed was considered fact-checked, assumed, but then it became clear that, well, not everything printed is true, right? Then everything that was on the TV was considered fact-checked true. Then it became, well, that's not true. Then internet and so on and so forth. So, for small businesses, I think it is garbage in, garbage out. If there's enough thought into making whatever the statement is, it's on the receiving end to make sure it's like, wait a minute, like you said you graduated in 2023 and then you started this business in 2024, so you're out of school, then you somehow have like $10 million, business. It's like, maybe, but like I need to stop and think, like something may not be quite matching up, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe there's AI who will fact check for you, I don't know, but.
And my only pushback would be, we're already under such a heavy cognitive load with just clickbait that adding this new layer of trying to discern, because we're all going to have to be more skeptical, right? Of who we do business with where we get information. The cognitive load that we're already under, it's going to be more dangerous to drive in Colorado Springs, because it's like just one more layer of things that we can barely handle. Go ahead.
So change the subject a little bit. Do you have any thoughts on kind of what this means for what today we would call business intelligence, software and people, right? Like investing in business intelligence to produce data for us today to how our business is performing. Do I need those people or that software, or is generative AI going to play that role for me as I'm looking to better understand my business from the inside?
Yeah, so 2 things. One, the big companies that specialize in that, I bet they've already got a Gen AI add-on where they're using a proprietary model to accentuate and to say, hey, by the way, you don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to turn to Gen AI. We've incorporated it. So I think that's going to be one possibility. The second is that you heard the reference to deep research earlier. Well, Perplexity in particular just created a feature on their pro model called Labs, and it will do an industry analysis that includes citations as well as real-time Python script, figures, tables, and graphs that correspond to all that cited information in 10 minutes. And so, do you need to outsource that? there might be some, like those companies that specialize in business intelligence, competitive intelligence, are going to have to really up their game or rely on people that don't want to bring it in-house because the capability is almost there. Any other questions before we keep moving? 45 minutes was just, oh yeah. So some general ethical guidelines, fairness. Look, part of this is not even in your control. The reason you've got to take bias into consideration is because these models have built-in bias. It's in their training data. You're going to have to be, as Ethan Mollick says, the human in the loop that can discern bias, and it needs to be a continued open conversation in your organization that you are just as likely to get a biased result as an unbiased result if you're using generative AI. Being transparent about the use. So I developed the first AI in the Workplace course for all sophomores and above at UCCS last fall, which means I also allowed AI in all my classes, right? But my emphasis was tell me that you're using generative AI and tell me how you're using it. Now, this is really going to be important if you have to establish governance because someone in your organization or you are going to screw up. How do you handle that? It's only going to make it worse if it turns out I was using AI. And we've already got use cases in the legal system where these attorneys have been caught with fabricated case law. That's humiliating, right? The same thing can be just as humiliating in your organization if you're not the human in the loop, you've embedded a policy of integrity, and you're being transparent that you are using the model for the outcomes and when and how. This is just what I said again, you have to be responsible. Like, don't rely on Colorado regulatory, United States regulatory to embed integrity into your processes. You really do need to take responsibility for that. And I know that you've heard this over and over, but how are you protecting proprietary information in your organization? Either having people, shadow AI, people. So this is no joke, and I know I may have to end with this. So I was at Space Symposium, and I'm doing ad hoc qualitative interviews with Department of Defense contractors at Space Symposium, asking them, do they have policies in place? Have they seen policies in place? And I am not kidding you. Some of the largest DoD contractors on the planet were told, anonymize your prompts. What does that mean? Don't mention the industry. So context, an IP address, and one other easily accessed piece of information can allow any company to triangulate exactly where you work, who you work for, and what this is really about. Like, that is the absolute lowest bar for implementing policy for your organization. But in terms of data privacy, even if they say don't use, you can turn off using my information for training, no one is enforcing that. So however much you trust these companies, just, go into it with eyes open. We have absolutely no way to guarantee they're not using everything we give them, even if we ask them to turn it off. And then make sure that the way you're using it isn't costing any, human dignity. I'll end with this. And once again, happy to share everything that I didn't get to. But do not thoughtlessly outsource your expertise. Think about the value that you create in your organization. Think about how you're incorporating this technology into it, and make sure that you're not giving someone an excuse to outsource you. And like I know in being a professor, we have students that have so much anxiety about what this means for their job out of college. So what kind of value can I bring to that? Something that a model couldn't or perhaps shouldn't bring to it, which is engaging at that human level and enforcing or building that relationship that should not be easily replaceable. So really consider and don't thoughtlessly outsource your value and expertise in your organization, and make sure no one else does. Okay, I'll end there because we're out of time. Happy to follow up, reach out to me. I'm sure we'll be sharing the slide deck so that you can have a version of this to reference, and if you want to follow up, just let me know.